I think ground zero for what ails America is that for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents at the age of 30. That's the first time that creates rage and shame in every household. The average 70-year-old is 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. The average person under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy. Young people aren't entitled. They're entitled to be enraged. We are transferring money from the young to the old. It is the least American thing we could do.
That is author and businessman Scott Galloway on The View talking about how the young in America have a right to feel like they are being screwed over economically. Here's more.
What's the result? People are opting out of America. It used to be 63% of 30 to 34-year-old able-bodied people had kids. Now it's 27%. And I don't think it's because they've decided they don't want kids. I think it's because they've decided, well, we haven't raised minimum wage in 40 years. All the tax cuts go to older people. The largest capital transfer in history happens every year. Young people transfer $1.5 trillion to the wealthiest generation in history, and that's seniors. Young people aren't entitled. They're entitled to be enraged. We are transferring money from the young to the old. It is the least American thing we could do.
Okay, all of that is fascinating, and in his extended remarks, let alone in podcasting and books and all that, he identifies a lot of reasons that we've ended up in this situation. As you saw in there, he's talking about government policy, the way that taxes are done, the tax cuts that we have, all of that. But as a result of a question from Sonny, he does get into one area that The View is going to love, that perhaps some people who are so far on board might not like as much. Take a look at this.
We can acknowledge, I think, that many economic factors may not be in their favor, right? But is there also something to be said about the work ethic of kids today? We hear that a lot. This generation seems to prioritize work-life balance, flexibility to work remotely, job hopping. Does that factor in? Because I think work-life balance is very important.
Yeah. So one of my tips to young people, I ask my kids, when I say my kids, my students, where they expect to be economically by the time they're 35. And the majority of them expect to be in the top 10% or 1%. And then they go on to talk about balance. Let me dispel a myth. If you want to have influence or economic security, stop using the word balance. Unless you're freakishly remarkable, which most of us aren't, or you're smart enough to have rich parents. And if you want to be really successful and influential, expect to do nothing but pretty much work for 10 or 20 years. That's called capitalism. It's a cruel truth. But look, at the end of the day, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once.
Yes.
And it's
Well, I want to ask you for.
Okay, they obviously love that. Whoopi loves that. It actually mirrors something that Whoopi has said recently, which we'll talk about. And I like a lot of his diagnosis of the problem, but telling people fresh out of college, you need to do nothing but work for 20 years to be successful is definitely rough advice. I'm curious, Cenk, what you make of all of Scott Galloway's appearances there.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
I totally agree with him. So let me explain, because I'm not, so The View is at this point among the top 2 most establishment shows on television, Morning Joe and The View, okay? And so if you go in there and you tell them that the young people are getting screwed, they're gonna hate it, right? But the reason why Scott Galloway is a really good messenger of this is because he's otherwise kind of establishment-y. And so if you heard some of his other opinions, you might not love them. He's awful on Israel, etc. But that makes him a good ambassador for television. He did the same thing on Morning Joe. And so normally if I said the same exact things that Scott Galloway is saying, they'd be like, boo, get him off there, get him off there. No way, there's no way the young people are screwed in any way. They're all spoiled little brats, etc. And now why do they always say that? As I've told you many times, it's because their own children are spoiled. So they only have experience with super rich children. So they don't have experience with millennials growing up in Nebraska who are happy that they moved up to assistant manager at Burger King, right? So they're totally detached from reality. So Galloway almost has to do a little dig at young people in order to get Whoopi and everybody else to be like, yes, okay, all right, we'll listen now, as long as you hate them as much as we hate them, right? And so now, but he's not wrong on that work issue either. So if you want to have a good living, in the old days, you had to show up to work, do your job, and you take care, do your job, and the company takes care. Those days are so long gone. People who believe them are like, if they're not 98 years old, they're 98 years old in mentality, right? So like there's no corporation's gonna look out for you, blah, blah, blah. Come on, everybody knows this already, except the people on television, right? And so, but at the same time, if you want to, so in this new modern world, if you want to be in the top 10, 1, etc., yeah, you gotta work your ass off. And then it's still gonna be super hard, right? It's not anywhere near guaranteed. But if you want a life-work balance, you should be able to do that and be middle class in America, but we've destroyed that. So there's a difference in what you're trying to get to. But the most important thing he's saying is about how the rules have been rigged against the young. And it's done through the tax system, it's done through the laws. And that is a very important message for him to deliver to the most establishment show in the country, or the 2 most establishment shows, and their audience. So he can snap them out of hating young people for no reason and understanding, as he explained later in that segment, now housing prices are 4 times what they used to be, and education prices are twice what they used to be. So no, the young do not have it easier. They have it much harder than the older generation. Brian, what do you think?
I mean, 2 things occurred to me that I believe that. Well, first of all, this notion of balance grew out of, and you guys correct me and or weigh in here, but this notice of work balance really became popular after COVID. It's not as if we all chose to work from home or wanted to do like remote work. It wasn't even in my vernacular until it became imposed upon me by the economy. And then when COVID did sort of dissipate, all of the commercial real estate empty. There were no offices to go back to. They'd cut those budgets. They saved hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, corporations, by letting people work from home at least part of the week. So there's that. So I'm not really sure young people woke up one day and went, I want to work from home in this bedroom that I'm in. I'd rather do that. That just feels better to me. Second, I think you have to talk about wages. Wages it's not minimum wage. Everyone's wages suck. Everyone's wages have basically returned to 1980s levels and are going to stay there. So is it inflation? Is it that everything is expensive, or is it that we're making half as much as we made like 10 years ago, or we haven't kept pace with inflation? So I'm not really sure that the rage is warranted. I get it. People are pissed off, but essentially the transference isn't so much to like our senior citizens. The transference of wealth is to people like David Zaslav, who run Warner Brothers, or to overly compensated CEOs of companies who underperform, even from the perspective of shareholders who own their stocks, and yet have these enormous salaries and pay packages and bonuses. So I'm not sure we should blame senior citizens. I think we should blame this out of control, as you touched on it, tax structure, but wages. It's slipped away from us. I was talking to a TV executive, a very high-ranking TV executive last weekend in Atlanta, and I said, is the business ever coming back? And I meant the media business. And before I could even finish the sentence, he went, no, it's never coming back. It's dead. It's never coming back. The wages are never coming back. I mean, he said, and in fact, I'm retiring in a couple of years. I'm done. And I just was like, I don't know. I already knew that, but hearing it from someone who's a part of that structure, they know it. The transference is happening right in front of us, not to old people, but to the folks who are causing this stock market to run away like this train it is, and are benefiting wildly from part of this economy that the rest, all of us aren't benefiting from. It's just incredible. That's what scares me about things. Where's this all headed?
Yeah. So I think Brian's 100% right. Galloway made a couple of good points in that direction in the rest of the appearance as well. So for example, you mentioned raising the minimum wages. We haven't raised it in decades, right? And so the reason is because that's why one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with the issue. You raise the minimum wage, it raises the wages above it, right? We really, really need the middle class to be able to get back to a lifestyle where they're not struggling 24/7 and living under intense pressure. And the reality is that corporations are squeezing us in a vice grip, and we're all getting squeezed here. And Galloway made another good point. He's like, it's not even what he calls the super earners, which are people who are wealthy, doctors, lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, no, they're also getting squeezed. All of it is getting squeezed to the very, very top. And that's the point Brian's making. Like Zaslav will make $250 million 1 year when their stock price goes down. It's not attached to reality at all. It's just a highway robbery where the people at the very top are taking from all of the rest of us. And it's unsustainable. And he pointed out the top 25 wealthiest people in America pay on average 8% in taxes. So come on, no, at some point, people are gonna get super mad about this robbery. And in fact, it's already happened. The right wing is super mad about this robbery. That's why they're talking about political violence. They just have no idea what the proper target is. First of all, the methodology of violence is totally wrong. But they don't realize, no, you schmucks, it's the CEOs, it's the guys, the donors, the lobbyists, et cetera. Instead, they think, oh, it's the Mexican immigrant, it's the Palestinian, it's the whoever Fox News told me to hate today because Fox News is trying to protect the guys who are robbing us blind.
You're so, I could not have articulated that better. I mean, that's just it. It's just, there is rage and the target is the wrong target. And, and you also see it in media accounts of like how independent voters are starting to lean. You'll see like, there's a lot of talk in Atlanta about how Biden is losing the black vote in Atlanta and they're leaning into Trump. And I think it's like, there's anger and rage, and there's this sense that Trump will bring about an alternative that might be better than where we are. But it's again, they're picking the wrong favorites and they're bashing the wrong targets. And I don't know what the solution is for that.
Yeah, it's a political rebellion / revolution where you begin to understand who's actually causing your problems and have a healthy, constructive political and rhetorical fight against those people. Not a violent one, not a physical one, not a crazy one, and not one where you hit the people with the least power and leave the people with the most power alone. That's not gonna ever solve your problems. The person without power, by definition, has no power. They didn't do this to you. The people with the power did this to you. Come on, guys. It's not that hard to figure out.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.